Hi guys, welcome
Hey
to
guys.
yeah, welcome to the Unspun Yarn. This is my first attempt at a live stream. Glad to see so many people in the chat that are familiar names, familiar faces. Hi John. Hi Julie Beth. Sanrixian's here with us today. Bernie. Hi Bernie. Oh Bronny. Bron Steris is in the chat. Oh, great. Some nice people here in the chat today. So I've got my two guests here with me today. My name is Nessie, Questing Beast. You may have seen me on the Here Be Dragons channel as one of the co-hosts. To my other left, right, is Charla from Share the Music. And on my far left is Amanda from Disputed Lands, Crayfood's daughter, here with us today to talk some um, Garth Greenhand, one of our favorite subjects. So,
Thank you, Ness. I looked
so
over at the live stream and I am very blurry. I'm sorry, guys.
it's no problem. Where's my comments? Are we still on this stream, guys?
Yeah, I think we are. We're still going.
Okay,
Hey guys.
because I thought I lost the chat and everything. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. So please bear with me today.
No, we're good. We're doing good.
All right, so what is a green man? We talk about Garth Greenhand, Garth Greenhair, Green Man, the wild man of the woods. What are we talking about when we say Garth the Green, Amanda?
So it said that Garth Greenhand was the progenitor of the first men. Said that he possibly predated the arrival of the first men, walking the length and breadth of the land and trading with the giants and the children of the forest. Some say that he had green hands, green hair, or green skin overall. And in other tales, it said that he had antlers like a stag. Said that he was a fertility god and he brought about fertility of the land, and that he would not only brought about fertility of the land, but fertility in women, and they would become fruitful, and just some really interesting stuff with the myth of this famous progenitor that George R.R. Martin has put into the storyline. It definitely gives the Breach and just his history in general a lot of flavor, and it harkens back to a lot of other mythologies that we have in our own real world. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and so the Reach is well known as the breadbasket for Westeros. It feeds the rest of the country, all the other kingdoms. You hear images of how fruitful and abundant and fecund everything is when they're talking about the richness of the South. They're talking about not just as in wealth, as in monetary value, but the wealth that it has in natural resources and products. So it's always like the land of plenty. And you have names for the rivers because Reach, as I found out, thank you, Joe Magician, is a geographical name for an area that is fed and watered by a river system. And so we have the Mander going through and winding through the Reach, and it lends to its prosperity and its fertility. So the water source is just as important as the land source there in the Reach, as we found out. So, and we start Old Town would be like the gateway to the Reach. It's not really accessible from the eastern half of Westeros without going through, a separate kingdom. So all its trade comes in through the mouth of the Mander and up the Honeywine with Old Town. So it's always been a very prosperous area, right, Amanda? Where we're talking about trade. You were talking about people coming early. The earliest things that we have record of are people coming to this area for trade. So there were lots of natural resources there.
It's been an area of trade for a very, very long time, and it's even stated in the World Book that possibly traders from Viseryia and the Summer Isles would come in, even, during the dawn of days or what have you. They were, very, very, very long ago. And Old Town itself, is incredibly old, and they have, a incredibly old structure that's right there, a fused stone that might be connected to the Great Empire of the Dawn. It's very interesting, and it is a very, very fertile area, and it's a great place for trade. So it has fertility, it has wealth. It's definitely the breadbasket of Westeros.
I did a little search of the meaning of green hands, and it's actually, the first meaning was someone who was on their first time on a ship. They were called a green hand. I believe it's still a term that we use today. I know in cowboys they said greenhorn, but I know in the oil field they call workers hands, and if they're inexperienced they call them green. So green hands was someone on a ship on their first voyage, and we were given two options on how Garth Greenhands arrived in Westeros. And one story was that he came up through Dorne, and the other was that he arrived by ship, which I think, between the definition of green hands and it just making sense to arrive in the Reach by ship and use the waterways for that area, that I think that we can optimistically say that he probably arrived by ship on one of the trading vessels in the beginning.
Right on. So we got young Garth arriving in Westeros way back in the Dawn Age, and we hear the stories of like Johnny Appleseed and the early American folk tales. We have a young man who, with his sack of seeds, travels across the country, exploring and meeting the native people that live there, and planting trees, planting apples specifically. And one of the other, I did a little looky-loo on what the meaning of Garth is. A Garth is an enclosure, especially for things like orchards. And the Reach is very well known for its orchards, its apples, especially there in Old Town. We have the the cider house that brews the strong fire cider that Maester Aemon loves so much. And there's an apple orchard there. It's very, very well known across Westeros. And then we have Robert talking about the fire plums and the wines, and the peaches, especially from Highgarden, are very prominent in the story. So orchards are just another Garth reference if you think about it. So an enclosure that has a lot of fruit trees sounds like Highgarden to me, with its sitting on the hill with the walls and its peach orchards. So, and Hightower is the home of where Garth made his eventually had his seat and ruled as the High King of the First Men.
Yeah, and Highgarden, and he also planted the Three Singers, which are the intertwining weirwoods that can be found. It was either Highgarden or it was, I think it was Highgarden that they have the Three Singers. And then it's also said that he planted the Oaken Seat, which is the oak throne. It's a living throne that the descendants of House Gardner, which is the line that directly descends from his firstborn, are descended from. And so his descendants actually sat upon a living tree throne. And it said in the world book that Garth was responsible for all the trees and all the flowers that can be found in Westeros. So it's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's really interesting to see the connection that Garth has to, trees, to nature, to fertility, and to bring about the blooming of Westeros. So
yes, yeah. I think that in Garth's case, when you think of green, you think of abundance, you think of fertility, you think of fruitfulness, and all of that. And to me, maybe as a younger man, a green hand, he, traveled the Westeros and was propagating more than the trees and everything. And then when he claimed his seat, maybe that was another step in his growth from a green hand or a younger, more inexperienced person to more of the Green King, or however you want to say it.
Right. Well, if you look in mythology, you have several incarnations of the green gods. You have the young lord that is traveling throughout the land, and these would be figures like Angus Og from Celtic mythology, who's the young lord in the spring who gets a little frisky with some river goddesses. And then you have the Dagda, who is, in my opinion, he is a very, very close representation of Garth, because not only is he a father figure, but he represents the fertility and manliness, all the attributes of like a father god, where he has interests in agriculture. He has the power of life and death and controls the time and the seasons. So he's like the world itself and the power behind the world. So and he, fathers all of the other, incarnations of himself. Like his children would have one of his aspects. And like Angus would be like the spring lord we were talking about, and he has the spring, the fertility, the youth. And other children of his would be like Don, who is the underworld god, who is has the powers of life and death, and the cauldron of rebirth, which is also one of the Dagda's key associations, is the cauldron. And Amanda, you talked about the drowning and drown gods, and the under going underwater. So the cauldron kind of represents the going underwater, or going into the underworld. Is that?
I can see that. Yeah. And it said in the myth of Garth that he possibly is a much darker deity that demanded blood sacrifice. And in some tales, the green god dies every autumn, only to be reborn again with the coming of the spring. And so there's a lot of parallels with a lot of different mythologies that can be found within our own real world, which depict the same sort of pattern, where you have a god dying during the fall. So the death of the god represents winter, and the god later, comes back to life, is resurrected during the spring, and that's when the fertility comes, and that's when the grass becomes green, the trees bloom, and the animals come out of hibernation and start, propagating and reproducing. That's just kind of like the cycle of nature. And
I'm living that cycle of nature with my sheep.
Seasons. Your sheep, that's exactly what, they're getting busy right now, right?
Yeah.
So
yes.
Yeah.
They had their babies back in December. And so, it's spring they're getting busy again. We should be having babies again, before spring is over. So
Nice. I love baby goats. I love baby sheep. So you're gonna have to send me pictures when that happens.
oh, I will.
Okay. And so the really cool thing with the green god dying and being resurrected is the implications for the series itself, because we have a world where the seasons are broken. Where winters can last, years, summers can last years. They never know when, winter and summer is going to come, how long it's going to be. We've had, false springs, and it's just very interesting because it's a very erratic nature, and it's broken. It doesn't work anymore, and so the cycle of seasons is no longer there. So with Garth being a very, very ancient character, deity, figure, however you want to look at him, the implications that he may have something to do with this this cycle that the storyline currently has with their seasons, it is there. So it's something that's very interesting, and it's something that I think more people should be looking at.
He did seem to rule for a very long time. It wasn't like he ruled for one spring and then went into winter. He ruled Westeros for a very long time, and to the point that we don't know if there were several Bran the Builders, and we don't know, of his other offspring, if they were just one, or if there were multiples, or if there were more than one Garth Greenhands even, because it's so far in the past that it's, legend and myth and all of that. But it definitely lasted longer than one spring. So were the seasons
definitely
broken all the way back then?
Right, because they talk about how long Garth lived and how one man could accomplish all of these things in just a normal span of years. So the timeline is very wonky on that end. It's very vague, and it leads the reader to just imagine how such a thing could be accomplished. But then we're also looking at, this is not unlike the modern mythology that we have read in other societies or cultures. The time really doesn't have a meaning. It just is. They talk about the golden age where the gods would live on the earth with the people that are worshiping them. These are like the golden age in Greece, or the Zeb Tepi from Egyptian mythology. And then the time before the flood, if you're talking about the Babylonians and Sumerians, where the gods actually walked the earth with their people. And then some cataclysm happened, or the wickedness of the people or what have you, they left the people and ascended. So, they left them to their own devices to make up stories and retell the stories of their adventures on Earth or Planetos or what have you. So this is how the myths began. And just like a game of telephone, they change and you're retold and renamed and reshaped throughout the generations. So what we hear now and what we have read could have changed over and over and over again over thousands of years. So it's all interpretation, but the idea behind the myth is what is the most important thing that's being transmitted along.
Right, because people also in mythology humanize in I don't want to inanimate objects or nature. They will humanize storms, and like the storm god becomes a man, or like Thor and Zeus and Poseidon, are all humanized gods that are just natural things to us in modern day.
Well, that's just kind of like our brain wrapping around things that we don't understand, and we try to make things that are relatable to the way that we live and the way that we see things, so that our myths reflect us in a way that our society or our culture has shaped us. As a culture and shapes us, that's how we shape our own mythology. So they pictured Garth as this agrarian guy who just went around getting jiggy with the ladies, having having lots of kids. Their next crop was like the most important thing to a farmer. That's what most of these people were. They're out, they're planting their crops, they're plowing the fields in the spring, planting their seeds, and they're just hoping for a good harvest. That's what the small folk, the farmers and whatnot, that's the most important thing to them, is the harvest in the next year and surviving. So you can't survive.
And in a situation where there's not heavy population like Westeros at that time, propagating it with people would be just as important as propagating the food and the trees and everything. So the dual purpose that Garth serves, as far as fertility, affecting the vegetation and the women's ability to give birth, is a huge part of that also.
Right. So yeah, when you look at the Reach, it's like the most heavily populated area in Westeros. It can support a large population because it's able to feed it. But that's one of the resources of the Reach is its manpower. So like when you're fielding an army and you can field 100,000 foot soldiers and 600 horse, and it's no big deal. All of the flower of the Reach is in its war machine as well. They talk about that. How Renly was coming with all of the flower of the Reach, the chivalry and the knights, and it's this huge army. So they're able to field quite a bit of manpower. So that's another aspect they're doing regarding its fertility.
An army travels on its stomach, right?
Right. So the Reach can go pretty far.
Because I'm not going to bring up Winds of Winter chapters, so never mind. But we've seen the opposite effect,
Yeah, an army can't travel very far if it doesn't have a lot of resources. So right. You can get stuck in a little village somewhere, starving to death.
Yes.
Okay. So, Amanda, what's this about Nimble Dick Crab that you've been hinting at for?
So I have talked about Dick Crab. We might have to backtrack. So yeah, we talked about Dick Crab. I'm gonna look here real quick. Okay, so people in the chat right now have watched my videos, and basically, I'm gonna give the shortest explanation that I can. That's going to make sense. So we know that Garth Greenhair, we know that Garth was one of described as a progenitor of the first men. It said that he, was likely the first king who brought the first men to Westeros. However, there's another tale of a first king. It's of the Great Barrow. It's just this ancient place that is actually located in the north. And it said that the first king of the first men is buried there. And there's a curse placed upon it that's going to make pretenders to the title grow corpse-like in their appearance. And so every time I read the World Book, we always, and there was a lot of information put out there on Garth, quite a bit. And so we found a lot of information showing Garth to have lived for 1,000 years. He was a green man. He's associated with trees, planting all the trees, sitting on a tree throne, doing all these great things, teaching people how to farm. However, on the other side, we're given in the World Book a lot of information about one other character, and that other character is the Green Man, or is the Gray King. And the Gray King is like the visual polar opposite of Garth. It said that he is a gray man with a gray beard and gray eyes and even gray skin. So Garth is a green man with green skin. The Gray King is a gray man with gray skin. And there's a lot of implications within the World Book that he was not very fond of trees. It said that he taunted the storm god, who lashed out with a thunderbolt, causing a tree to burn. It said that he killed a demonic tree named Egg, which is most likely a weirwood because it's a pale demonic tree that fed on human flesh. And then it's also said that he slew Naga, which if you watch one of my videos, there's a good chance that Naga may be more than he appears. It's possible that the bones of Naga may actually be petrified weirwood. So in the tale of the Gray King slaying Naga, what he's just doing again is, he's slaying trees. So you can see that he's a gray man who also lived for 1,000 years, who's not very fond of trees. And with the curse of the first king, it said that pretenders to the title will grow corpse-like in appearance. And the gray man, or the Gray King, is a gray man who somewhat, with the description, some might argue that he was possibly corpse-like in appearance with his gray skin. So I quickly came to identify that the two probably didn't like each other if they lived in the same timeline. They're just, and so
relatable.
However, I did a lot more research, and there's a lot of stuff that points towards the two possibly actually being brothers. And I have a video, it's called The Great, Fratricidal Clues between, Garth and the Gray King. But anyway, it's an hour-long video, and I'm not going to get into it. But what you find within the story are different parallels and different symbols and different allegories that show this battle. And one of those allegories, at least for Garth, is actually the symbol of the crab. And I'm not 100% sure why exactly we're using the crab, at least at this point. I haven't, 100%, kind of set my sights on, put my finger on it. Why? Because there's a couple different explanations. But anyway, it said that the Old Man of the River was a version of the Rhoynar's Long Night Hero. It said that he put aside his differences with Mother Rhoyn's other children to sing a song, which brought, the end of the long night. Anyway, a lot of these Long Night Hero stories are different variations that the author is trying to kind of provide us with little tidbits of information. So it said that the Old Man of the River fought the Crab King. Now, when we get to the tale of Clarence Crab, it said that he had a wife who would kiss his enemies' heads to life. And if you watch my video
watch Amanda's videos,
Gray King's wife, it's quite
brilliant.
possible that the two men were fighting over the same woman, and this woman had the power to resurrect through a kiss. And with the tale of Clarence Crabbe, he actually has a wife who is able to kiss, heads to life. And
Right.
it said that he fought the King of Duskendale. And the King of Duskendale, his sigil is actually a sigil of motley. It's a sigil of just checks, of yellow and black checks. And there's a lot of other things in that video about the mermaid wife that show that the Great King Azor Ahai may be associated with the author using the symbol of a fool to kind of portray the Azor Ahai. It's the fool archetype, if you will. So you have the Crab King versus the Old Man of the River. You have Clarence Crabbe with his wife kissing heads to life and of his enemies, and then he also fought the King of Duskendale, who has the motley sigil. Then you have Dick Crabbe, who fights the fool Shagwell. And it's interesting when you're actually seeing Dick Crabbe or you're reading this, because there's a werewood involved in this fight scene. There's a werewood, there's a morning star, and there's just a lot of different, very intriguing symbols that are being thrown out there between the fight between these two figures. And what's interesting with Dick Crabbe is that you're also getting that fertility symbol because his name is Dick. So you literally have, a guy named, Dick Crabbe fighting the fool Shagwell. And then you have, let's see. Yeah, and it's cool because when he actually is killing Dick Crabbe, it's like he's, it's almost like a dolorous stroke type of a symbol, where because he's killing Dick, it harkens back to almost like a genitalia wound, if you will. But anyway, also people associated with the lands of Good Brother are described as crabbed and queer. So and the house Good Brother in my video, it's I talk about how House Good Brother is another symbol of this Garth type figure. So you have the Crab King versus the Old Man of the River, Clarence Crabbe versus the King of Duskendale. You have Dick Crabbe versus the Fool Shagwell. And then, of course, you have the people of House Good Brother, who are described as being crabbed and queer. So it's there's a little bit of a pattern there. So that's I haven't really put my finger quite yet on why the author is using the crab. There's a couple explanations that I look at, but I haven't really set my mind on one yet. But also, one last one I forgot, and I'm sorry, but Lord Godric, who of the Three Sisters, his sigil is actually the sigil of a spider crab, and he talks about how much he loves storms. That and storms are another fertility type of a thing that we'll probably talk about some more. I'm sure that we're going to get into that. But it says that storms, Lord Godric said the word as fondly as another man might say his lover's name. Storms were sacred on the sisters before the Andals came. Our gods of old were the lady of the waves and the lord of the skies. They made storms every time they mated. He leaned forward. The kings never bother with the sisters. Why should they? We are small and poor. And yet you're here, delivered to me by the storms. So you have Lord Godric, who loves storms, and his sigil is, of course, that of the spider crab. So yeah, there's actually, once you kind of know what you're looking for, it's kind of hard to unsee. But
yeah,
I'm sorry, Nessie. I was just going to compliment Amanda. I was watching one of your videos to because it's been so long since I watched it, and the way you broke down House Good Brother in it, and the relation between Garth Green Hands and the Grey King and the house sigils and everything. It was so spot on, and just it was just great. I just loved it.
Oh, thank you.
But I found a lot of relatable, stuff about, House Good Brother, and from listening to you, it just blew my mind how on the Iron Islands there's a house representing fertility and trees and everything that Garth Greenhands represents. There's a house on the Iron Islands that represents that, and that I remember you saying that it's so far from the sea that people grow up there and have never even seen the sea. So it's like they're not even a part of the Iron Islands. They're more like the Reach.
More like the Greenlands.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the Greenlanders. They're always having their fights with they talk about the Greenlanders, and generally when they're doing that, they're talking about raiding along the western coast, which is going to include the Western Lands and the Reach proper. So, and I think we've got a little something to expect in Winds of Winter along that line when our pseudo storm god stand-in Euron invades the Reach and devastates Old Town and causes a lot of, comes blowing in like a hurricane, as I like to say. Euron is an interesting name too, because with his connotations to the storm god, he calls himself the storm. I am the storm, and his name itself derives from Euros, the storm, the ill wind that blows from the east, bringing the storm. So if you remember back in Feast for Crows, Euron comes in right after a massive storm. His ship, the Silent, sails into the port at Lord's Port. The storm has come in and has apparently knocked his older brother, Balon, into the ocean, and he's eaten by crabs. So the storm comes in, and either by proxy or by actual hands-on, so to speak, Euron comes in, sets himself down on the sea stone chair. So, yeah. And Euron and the crabs feast on his brother. So, look to see a lot of storm imagery from Euron in the upcoming we have a lot of it now, but if you want to read anything having to do with Euron, they want to blow your mind. And I wish I could post links, but I'm an idiot and haven't learned that talent yet. I'll post the links. I'll post links in the description. Please read Emmett's Poor Quentin's essay on Euron Crow's Eye. It will blow your mind if you haven't already read it. Please do. There's so much there. So, okay, carry on. So Amanda House Good Brother, that has a lot of implications with Euron as well, correct? Good brother, bad brother,
yeah,
not so great brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's said that when the reader is talking with Asha, they're actually talking about a different Ironborn character that sounds a lot like Euron, and the reader talks about how he doesn't like the name, and it's not a good brother, but he doesn't like the name. And then he says that time is like a wheel, and what has happened before will perforce, happen again. And later on, we hear the tale in the Wayward Bride chapter of Euron Good Brother, also known as Euron Bad Brother, or just Bad Brother. And And I think we lose Nessie?
I think she just stepped away for a minute.
Okay. So yeah.
Technical difficulties here, guys.
So
I'm so
you're
sorry.
gone. Oh no, you're fine. So Euron actually sounds a lot like Euron. And he basically set up the King's Moot and killed everybody there and took the crown. However, there was one person who was not in attendance. And so Bad Brother was such an awful ruler that eventually they the holy priest, the drowned priest, they said, well, the King's Moot was invalid because not all of the contenders were there. And anyway, so what happens is the latecomer, whose name I cannot remember right now. It's been a while. I'm coming out of retirement. Yes, Torgon the latecomer. It said that he was able to come in and claim the Driftwood crown. So it's possible because Theon wasn't there, and Theon should have arguably rightly have been there, that we will get Theon as a parallel to Torgon the latecomer.
So we can look for Theon in his and Theon has a lot of Grey King imagery as well, because he's gone through such a transformation there under the Dreadfort. His hair has gone white and he's aged. He looks like a 70-year-old man when he's finally seen by Asha. So that would be an interesting tie there too. Correct, Amanda? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
If you want to look for Grey King imagery, just read those Theon chapters. It's there's so much there, especially with he and Jane are making their escape from the walls of Winterfell. They're taking that leap off of the walls into the the unknown, so to speak. So there's a lot there to look at.
And the kinslaying, also that Amanda brought up in her video. No one is as cursed as a kinslayer, and that the way that plays into the Grey King and the curse at Burrowton even.
Right, yeah. Because like you say, no one's as accursed as the kinslayer, and the hooded man in the Winterfell Godswood calls Theon kinslayer and whispers it like a curse to him. So that's a pretty good catch there, Shar.
Amanda.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. So we were also talking about, let's see, green and the color green, and green is grass, and what green means is grass. Let's see. Hunter.
Yeah, green can mean the color of living plants, growing, living, vigorous, unseasoned, like wood. If your wood is green, it's unseasoned, it doesn't burn as well, but also applies to people. As unripe and immature, a tender age, youthful, inexperienced, gullible. All of these things have come to be definitions of green. Also, skin or complexion of someone who's sick can be green. Although in the story, Garth the Green is health and vitality, but he's sick. So that's kind of a flip on the color green as it usually applies to people. And it's flipped in the story to how it applies to plants.
That's right. So we look at some of the other corn gods, and we see that it's
Sorry, can you put up sanrixians?
oh man, yes, good one. Thank you. Your wood is green. You may need to see a doctor. I agree with this take, especially in the springtime when everything and the sap is rising and things are kind of horny out there. Watch out for spring break. Don't catch the coronavirus. Thank you very much. So I've modded some people in the chat. So yes, if you could post some links to some of these, like Amanda's channel, Disputed Lands, that'd be great. And maybe possibly the essay from Poor Quentin. I finally figured it out. Yay.
Nice.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. I am not the most technical person in the world. So say yes. There we go. All right. So you talk about the crab king and the old man in the river. And that made me think about the House Manderley, who has the merman sigil, and talks about their statue as having, old fish foot. And the Manderleys weren't always a House of the North. They came from the Reach proper. We're not exactly sure where in the Reach their original holdings were, but we do know from the World Book that they came in conflict with the Gardener Kings regarding a marriage alliance and a marriage pact. So we have Manderleys, the Manders. They say that the Mander River was named for them. And that made me think about the old Manderley of the river, Mander, and their Merling symbolism as being old men of the sea, or Merlings from under the sea. So, and coming in conflict with the Gardener Kings, or with Garth, the Crab King, would be another one of those clues that you were talking about.
Oh yeah. What's I think interesting with the Manderleys is we kind of get a little bit of it's almost like House Goodbrother, in a sense that we have in the middle of this, northern area. We have this. It's almost like a house that doesn't belong. It's there, and it's
like
supposed to be there, but they don't necessarily belong. And they kind of have a little bit of a different culture, and they do all that other stuff. What is cool is that we do get kind of like some hints on the Merling King, which seems to be something that is quite well known as far as like a figure or a tale. And like, for example, the Spears of the Merling King. Peter Baelish, he named his ship the Merling King. We see, like, I think the Merman's Palace is off in the area of the Bay of Pigs. We see a lot of different, hints that this is actually, like some sort of figure that's fairly well known. And they use that as actually like their sigil. And what's interesting is that, when you actually take a look at the information and everything that you're looking at, it's possible that Merling King could also just be another variation of, that monomyth. And so it's a good house to kind of look at their culture, look at what they do. It's, he calls himself a knight of the Order of the Green Hand, and he's the only one that does so. And so it's very cool. It's supposed to be an order that was brought about by House Gardner, during like the Age of Heroes. So it's a very, very old order, and we don't know a lot about it. And so it's very, very interesting. because people want to know more. People want to know, what does this do? What does this special secretive order do? And he's one of the only survivors. What's interesting, however, is that there's probably one more survivor that we just haven't been told is one. And that survivor is probably going to be House Hightower, because at the time of the Field of Fire, when Aegon came, most of the lines of the Reach, at least their lords and a lot of their firstborn sons, secondborn sons, were there on the Field of Fire, and they were fighting Aegon and his sisters on the Field of Fire. So everybody who was supposed to be part of this Order of the Green Hand, this Knights of the Order of the Green Hand, they supposedly died. However, House Hightower, who was also part of the Reach, did not attend the Field of Fire. They stayed in Old Town, and they welcomed Aegon and his sisters with open arms. And so there's a lot of different people are like, what's House Hightower up to? What's going on with House Hightower? They're secretive, and we don't know a lot about them, and everybody wants to know what's going on. And guess what? They may be part of that secretive knightly Order of the Green Hand as well. And they were actually part of that secretive order at the very last moment whenever the Reach fell. But House Manderly, they had been gone from the Reach for like 1,000 years before the Field of Fire. They were kind of out of the loop. So if you want to know if there is a survivor of the last bits of the knightly Order of the Green Hand that were probably practicing, it's probably House Hightower. But that's all I can say about that. But
that tracks, Amanda, because like you say, the Hightowers are always into a lot of or suspected of being behind a lot of political intrigue, as far as with the Faith of the Seven, and even in affecting politics in the capital, the King's Landing itself. We've had several Hightowers that were hands of the king. So they have always been like a shadow government, is how I kind of look at it, the power behind the power, who are pulling the strings with, they have their hands and their eyes and their ears everywhere. The Citadel is everywhere. There is a castle that has a maester. So their information network is pretty well and far flung. So having a secret, somewhat like, the Knights of the, help me out here. The Crusades.
But Knights of the Cross and the Viseryia order.
Right. There's secret orders like that.
There's a few secretive knightly orders, which are out there and completely, mysterious and interesting. And you can actually go down a rabbit hole that will lead you into a pit of just like crazy information. If you ever decide to just kind of look at that, you will fall into a rabbit hole that is an endless pit. So beware.
I do think the Manderleys are still operating as agents of the Order of the Green Hand. They may not be cooperating with anyone else, but I do think that their mental state is that, because Lord Manderly did make some major plays with the phrase, and was it his granddaughter that dyed her hair green?
Yes.
Yeah, and the feisty one.
Amanda with the green hair.
Yes, and so I do think that they may be handing down the tradition of the Knights of the Green Hand in their family, and making some moves on their own, but maybe not connected with any other Knights of the Green Hand, since they are separated to the north.
Well, if you have eyes in the north and you have eyes in the south, you have eyes over the entire kingdom. So it's like almost polar opposite areas. If you look on the east coast of you're in the major harbor of the north, the only harbor of the north, and you control the trade in and out of the north from White Harbor. You also have the harbor in the southeast, controlling trade and commerce in the Reach. And as you know, land travel is not that easy. In these day and times,
No,
you have wagons, the roads, or even the King's Road is not that great. So the most reliable and easiest way to transport goods and information would be up through the rivers, like through barge and boat and what have you. And you just it's easier to just move up the rivers and down the rivers with barges than it is to try to convey wagons and wagon trains across rutted roads. So these areas will be better linked in for information. So the Hightowers and the Mandolins having control of these river mouths are really good indicators that they've got a lot of good information and from travelers, as a port on one end, and then upriver from the interior, because goods and information flow up and down. So yeah, and then Wyman Manderley, the Manderleys themselves, if you look at George's genetics, he likes to stick with a type. So all the Manderleys are these large, over boisterous, like larger than life type figures. And, we have Lord Too Fat to ride, Too Fat to sit a horse. And his sons are fast approaching, his size and girth, but they're still warriors, and they go out. But they represent all those characteristics that you would associate with Garth. The Lord Wyman travels with wagons and wagons of food, wherever he goes. So he's bringing all these gifts of food, not because he's, worried he's going to miss a meal or anything, but it's also like a sign of his wealth and generosity that he could show off that he has all this food. So that's like an aspect of abundance, of being able to, provide food like that. So there's that, and they've got their castle there that's situated in White Harbor, that actually, is still connected with the Wolf's Wood, the Wolf's Den, where there's that huge and giant wood, within an enclosure, like a Garth. And it is still connected there. Yeah, and it's still connected. It says that the face on there, this huge, giant, fat weirwood, you kind of can see how it would sort of look like one of the wide, fat Manderleys sitting up on the top of the, in the merman's court. The connection there with that giant weirwood. So the Manderleys are a very interesting house, and you should probably look to see what their political machinations are going to be in the north come in the winds of winter. If you believe in the Grand Northern Conspiracy, some people do, some people don't, but there's a lot of hints and clues that even if they're not connected, that there's a lot of people trying to get some things done in the north for a Stark restoration. Yeah, they're the northern tower behind the throne. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we've been going at this for be a good time to take a break and thank everybody who's shown up in the chat. I appreciate every one of you that's come for my inaugural live stream. Just witness me turn red in the face. It's really great to have you here. I couldn't do any of this without your support. You're my friends in the chat. You know who you are. Sanrixian, Bernie, my buddies from Here Be Dragons, John and Steven are both in the chat. And I just want to thank you all for coming up. And it means a lot. Just that you might want to spend a couple hours out of your day listening to me and my friends prattle on about mythology and Song of Ice and Fire and nimble dicks. But I appreciate it. So this is the point where I say, if you like what you're hearing, then you hit the like button. If you want to see some more of this, maybe you might want to subscribe to the channel. We'll bring you some more fun, interesting, weird content in the weeks to come. So I appreciate it.
Amanda's here, and no one has said fat pink mask yet. This,
Nobody said fat pink mask.
not that I've
Oh, so I will here. Let me say it right now. Fat pink mask.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
We appreciate this.
I'm always here for you.
And I don't know what that has to do with Garth Green. But
it's Charlie there. He's a young boy from the Reach who's kind of Garth-like in his size. Not about his mouth, but who likes to choose traveling on a ship to Old Town to begin an adventure. So he does have a little bit of the green hand symbolism there. And
he's actually green the whole trip.
Yes, he was. He did not. Sam does not enjoy traveling by ship. He gets sick multiple times. So they're and then they have that lovely little party after Maester Aemon has passed, where his fat pink mask is put to use.
So I said it so that we didn't have to talk about it. I mean, like we're good here. We're good. I don't want to talk about Sam's fat pink mask. Or no. Not right now. Let's
not right now.
I don't want to think about Sam's fat pink mask. Oh, Stephen, you wrote Matt Big Past. So,
yeah. Think
so.
Fast.
Okay.
So I can get this out of my head.
Thank you for that lovely image. It's going to scar me for the rest of the day. So, valiant effort, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Use that mask, Sanrixian says. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Wiz. Yep, the motion on the ocean. Yep. This just turned into a thirst stream. Well, if anybody...
A Samuel thirst stream, you guys.
That's a
Samuel thirst stream. You heard it here first, guys.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you for letting us.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. So that's Sam in his at his horniest, shall we say?
And he's prolific because, as far as we know, one time and Gilly is pregnant.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so that was that was show, but yeah,
that was.
But they wanted us to have a happy ending, but we'll find out. He does have baby Sam, which he's adopted along the way. So he does have a child that he's raising, not necessarily his, but Sam's going to be a good dad. So yeah, Sam's horny on the boat, lands in Old Town. Sam's got a horn on his that's the only thing that he brings with him, that comes with him from the wall. So Sam has a lot of horn imagery there, like the Tarleys have the horn symbolism anyway, from Horn Hill and Harlan of the Horn and
dogs.
Yes, and we talk about you talk about all that horn imagery in one of your videos about the two brothers, correct?
Yes, she does.
Yeah.
I think she's muted.
Yeah, I muted myself while my dogs bark because I think the mailman is here. I'm expecting a package today, and I've been doing a lot of online shopping. Because we're not supposed to go anywhere. So, which is like crazy because I'm doing a lot of online shopping. Actually had a mini fridge delivered yesterday, and I'm just shopping to shop, and right now it's something to do. But So the mailman's here.
Yay! Special delivery. All
So
right,
I
so
don't normally do that, but I'm mailman's coming a lot now lately.
all right. So we got Sam in Old Town with the horn and his horn imagery, and we got the storm Euron heading toward Old Town, and the two of them are eventually going to collide at some point in the near future in Old Town. So Old Town Throwdown, something's going to happen there. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think Euron is going to be able to raise Krakens, or do you think he's just going to burn Old Town? What do you think? Do you think he's going to destroy the Hightower? Is he going to embark some blood magic, voodoo, whatever whammy? What do you think the Old Town Shuffle is going to be? Shar, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that there is a chance that we will get Krakens because he is putting a lot of blood in the water, and there's another instance of bodies or blood in the water and Krakens coming to the surface. And I can't remember if it's in the World Book or
Fire and Blood.
Fire and Blood.
Well, there's some reference to Krakens and blood in the water in the Arianne chapters, where the lady of Ghost Hill is telling Arianne about the pirates or whatever that are raiding in the Stepstones, and there's been bodies and Kraken seen in the Shipbreaker Bay. So they're talking about Krakens being raised there from the blood in the water and all the battles and what have you. So that's going on the East Coast, and maybe something similar will be occurring in the West Coast. We'll see. We don't know. We don't know what that fool is up to. He's crazy. This guy's a sociopath.
I'm ready. Give me Krakens. I want them.
Yeah. And we did, like Amanda said, they were talking about the giant Kraken that may or may not have appeared in Fire and Blood in the Sunset Sea there with the
Sun Chaser.
The Sun Chaser, yeah. And one of the ships being in a storm of all things. Imagine that, being associated with Krakens. So giant storm, giant squid, giant Kraken takes a ship down. So yeah. So there's a lot of
So I personally believe that we are not going to see any Krakens. At least they may be described as Krakens, but I don't think they're actually Krakens. I think that what is underneath the sea is possibly a root system. I think that it's the werewood net is what is underneath the sea. And I think that when there are spottings of it, that is what people, identify it as, is a Kraken that's pulling something down. When we see, it was
Xander and Arya crossing the river when it was swollen, and the tree.
Right. At Lord Haraway's town.
Yeah, and the tree is coming towards the barge, and the root system looks like a Kraken. If I'm mistaken.
Yeah. So like when Dunk, for example, is drowned, he sees something white like flash past him. And he's like, what was that? What was that? And it's a big thing. And it's like very mysterious. People, talk about it. When Davos is drowned in the Battle of Blackwater, he can feel something touch his leg. And the last thing we see as the chapter ends is his lungs filling for air as he's screaming. However, he miraculously survives and washes up at the Battle of the Blackwater. I have an entire video where I talk about how Shade of the Evening and Werewood are probably connected. And for example, the location where the Krakens were seen, in the Arianne sample chapter, it was the broken arm of Dorne. Now, if the Old Gods and the Green Seers did have anything to do with the breaking of the arm of Dorne, that's one of the biggest things they have control over are like the werewoods. So if that's what's down there underneath the sea, then that's a good location for that. So like in the Aeron sample chapter, the sea is described as like a black wine. There's all these different types of associations within the storyline, and so I personally, if the kraken squid sea stone chair is actually a type of
the tentacle imagery,
all of these like different underneath the sea references and its association to all those different things. It's said that all of Euron's gifts are poison. There's an association with Shade of the Evening and poison. And the water, the Dothraki called the
poison sea, the poison water.
The poison water.
So Amanda, I was thinking about what you were saying there about the tentacles and have you. They're always talking about anemones and what they are, and I think that's another connection, like you were saying, with the tentacles, because anemones, which is anemones, anemones, are these little creatures under the sea that will shoot out these fine tentacles to trap and feed with. So that's another thing with the tentacles and the net and the roots all connected together. So yeah, I'm digging this.
Yeah, and like Euron, whenever Aeron sees his face, he sees a massive writhing tentacles. But when we look at, for example, another type of green seer, if shade is like an analog to weirwood paste. Bloodraven is just like a figure with weirwood roots all over him. It's almost like he's getting a vision of a green seer in that kind of a way.
With the tangled roots and trapping.
And when Aeron gets a Shade of the Evening vision of his brother Uri, it's like, what waits for you underneath the sea? And he's like the drowned god, and he's like worms wait for you. So there's worms underneath there, but all throughout the story they describe weirwood roots as looking like worms,
right? And they talk about gray worms. And
so I think it might be described as krakens when it happens, like, oh, there's a kraken, but I think that eventually within the storyline we're going to find out that it may not actually be krakens.
No.
Is my heater too loud? I turned on my heater because I was cold. I didn't know if y'all could hear it or not. Just making sure.
No, we're good, Char. I can barely hear it.
Okay.
So, yeah, and they were talking about too the like who was it? Aegon the Fourth, I think, or the Unworthy, whose legs, he's this big fat giant guy. He's let himself go, and his legs are rotten and rooted, and they have worms in them. And you just see that worm imagery with this corrupted like figure who's sitting on a throne, and that's kind of gross. I wish I hadn't said that.
Yeah.
That imagery is kind of strong.
And your Aurelia video where you were talking about her having, being filled with, those worm-like things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we ever get time, like whenever we're chatting, I'll tell you about the time that I had to show nursing students how to apply leeches onto a wound, and one of the leeches got stuck on a TV. I'll tell you about it.
Leeches are another gross thing that they're, but they're also having that leech-like imagery as well in the story when you're talking about, Roose Bolton using the leeches, the white leeches, and he's called the Leech Lord. Having those that blood sucking.
Yeah, they're just as gross in real life. They're gross.
Yeah.
Totally.
And Chet with Chet coming out of the pond, or his dad coming out of the pond. He's the son of the leech man. There's lots of leeches in the story. Of blood sucking. Yeah, nasty. Blood sacrifice, blood sucking.
Burn them all. Burn them all.
Burn them all. Burn all the leeches. Okay, so we have covered most of the things in the document. If there anything you guys in the chat would like to ask questions, that'd be now. And if you want to throw your questions up in the chat, we'll get a few of those in before to see what you have to think about all this stuff. So let's see, you guys. You see any questions? If you have any questions, please post them up in the chat.
Well, while we're waiting, I do want to mention, because I wrote it down in the notes and I did not even mention it, is the Green Men and Garth. Like, Garth is so associated with like the old gods, the Green Seers, and his description is actually identical to the Green Men of the God's Eye. It said when Bran is actually in a Bran chapter, he's asking about the Green Men of the God's Eye, and he's talking about them, and he said that they have green skin, and sometimes they have antlers too in the stories. So you have a green skin, green man with antlers, and Garth is identically described, and so you see a very, I mean, almost like confirmed. I feel like it's almost confirmed there's a connection there. We got a planter of weirwoods. It said that the Green Men tended the weirwoods. We have a green man wearing antlers. The Green Men wear antlers and are green. Yeah. So anyway, the interesting thing is that in a So Spake Martin at a fan convention, somebody had asked George, like, what's going on with the Green Men? Are we ever going to see them? And George responded that the Green Men will come to the fore in the books later on. So, right. So what we are going to, and if there is this heavy connection to Garth with them, then we're definitely going to be learning more about Garth, which is great. I'm incredibly excited about.
Right. Well, we feel that this Isle of Faces and the God's Eye has got this huge. It's probably the largest standing area of weirwoods left on Westeros, if not the entire planet. This huge. It could be even the hub of the entire weirwood system, and with all of the roots connected underground through the riverlands and up into. Even as far down as the Stormlands, we have little small saplings in the rainwood of the weirwoods. So it's stretched. If you look at it, it's right in the center. And if anything is going to be like the hub of a network, the center is a logical place to have it. So having the Order of the Green Men at the tending the hub of the weirwood net there and protecting it and keeping the, no one is allowed. No, they don't allow anyone to visit the isle itself. They use the winds to push the boats away. They'll send birds out to attack people who are trying to, arrive by boat. But apparently you can land a dragon there, which is kind of cool. You have, I believe it was during the Dance of the Dragons, we had one visitor that went to the Isle of Faces to commune with the Order of the Green Men. Was it Alan of Hull or Adam of Hull?
Adam. And Adam. At that time he was Adam Valerian, because Corlys Valerian had adopted him and made him an official Valerian. So it was Adam Valerian who visited the Isle of Faces.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Adam Valerian with the Valerians, with that lovely seahorse symbolism in their sigil. So yeah, he was the only known visitor other than a certain young guy from the Neck, a couple of 150 years later to visit the Isle of Faces. They don't allow a lot of guests. They're pretty much in permanent quarantine, socially isolating. So yeah, and usually when there is some type of interaction there's something. I mean, it's huge. Whatever's going on in the kingdom or on Plantos at that time. So the first visit that we have recorded is going on during the Dance of the Dragons. We have huge destruction, continent-wide war that's going on. Dragons killing dragons, lots of death and destruction, and they are. They're sought out for their wisdom and their counsel as to, what to do to stop this war from going on. We never really get an answer. Eventually, though, the answer seemed that, okay, the dragons are going to die out. That'll take care of the situation. And then we get, it's 150 or so years before we have any more back. Then right before, the generation prior to them coming back, you've got this little skinny guy from the Neck, this green man from the Neck, the Reed, Howland Reed, who has got so much green imagery and symbolism there in the Neck, which I live in the swamp. I know how green it is here, the wet wild. Going and paying a visit to the Isle of Faces, and then things start happening in our story, after that trip. So, you've got your information network in the north there at White Harbor. You've got your information there at Old Town in the south. And right in the middle of everything is the Isle of Faces. So with all its roots and connections to north and south. So
oh, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, go right ahead.
Oh, so what I was going to mention is that one of the things that I believe the reason for Adam Valerian going to the God's Eye, because how like random is that? Like, exactly. I'm going to the God's Eye. I don't know what to do. I'm going to go there. And everybody's like, well, why did he go there? How did he know to go there? What did he learn? What made him do that? And one of the things that I noticed, and this was whenever I did my video on the Black Oily Stone, was that Adam Valerian's father, who was likely Corlys Valerian, had visited Essos and went to the kingdom of the Ephquebron that is now supposedly, the Ephquebron are now supposedly extinct. But he did go there and he reported carved trees and faces. And we see that when we read about the Ephquebron, we know that there is a likely linkage, like cousins to the children of the forest. And so with his father being one of the few people to have actually went to, a possible like ancient hub of those, that race of people, it's very unique, and you don't see any other people mentioned to have visited there. So it's possible that his father may know more than than we know of about the children of the forest. So, and it's possible that his father passed that information on. So when he went to the Isle of Faces, it may have been due to things that his father has said in the past.
Right on, that tracks. I mean, we think about Corlys Valerian, he's a sea snake. This guy has made nine voyages of Corlys Valerian. He went all over the world, seeing things that no Westerosi had seen before, reported back on. He sailed as far north as across the Shivering Sea, as far as he could go. Went as far as 1,000 miles. Then he tried to find a northwest passage to get around the northern part of Westeros. This guy was brave. This guy didn't he traveled and he saw the world. He's seen some things. He went as far as several voyages as last to Ashai. And if there's any place on Planetos it's like a weird wonderland, it's got to be Ashai, with all of its dark, looks like the city of the damned. With glowing green rivers and an hour of daylight a day, and it's like weird people that are just hanging around there, and no kids, and weird ghost grass. I mean, he's gone to the end of the world. So
illuminated fish.
Illuminated fish. He's like, if seeing something like that won't open your mind that there might be something a little bit weird going on in the world, open your mind to possibilities, I don't know what will. So he
amassed a fortune.
And Corliss got around. He might have gone, stopped by Garth, head up the warlocks, said, give me some of that shade. Let me, open my mind a little bit. So there's no telling what Corliss did on all those voyages. He's let's say he's just a little open-minded. So I'm digging on what you're saying. Stephen from Here Be Dragons YouTube channel has got a question here about Garth. Garth had lots of kids. Lots and lots and lots of kids. Do they figure into the larger narrative? Well, we know of there were 13 named children that founded all, these houses in the Reach. You have, of course, like his eldest was the gardener, Garth Gardner, and he founded the line of Highgarden and House Gardner. You have Floris the Fox. You have Maris the Maid. Yes. You have Divine.
Gilbert of the Vine.
Yes, and the twins, the Harlan and the Hunter, Ellen Eversweet, and all of these are, these have their own little tales around them. Brandon of the Bloody Blade, and Rose of Red Lake. All these kids of his, these famous kids of his, they all have like their own little stories and own little mythological legends surrounding them. So it's like, not only did he, was he a god, and is he part of a pantheon, or the founder of a pantheon? That would be like the closest thing to it. His children and founded all the houses, and everyone in the Reach wants to trace their lineage somehow back through one of these famous children of Garth, back to Garth himself, because that's the closer you are to status and power, is how close you are can connect yourself to the lineage of Garth. But we don't hear any houses in the Reach being founded by, a couple of his kids. We don't hear anything about our buddy Brandon, the Bloody Blade, but that's another story to tell. He may. So, yeah, I mean, do they figure into the larger narrative? Probably not directly. But if you're talking about, do they figure into like the pantheon and the mythology that the author is trying to embed in the story, then there's little hints here and there. So yes, and no, and yes. Shar, what do you think?
Yeah, because it seems like you have to take all these little pieces and try to fit them together to get a clearer overall broad picture, like a jigsaw puzzle. So I think that, George has sprinkled very pertinent information in all of these backstories and these, this mythology in world for us to solve puzzles, to figure out, what is repeating. I mean, everything is a cycle, and, time is a wheel, and everything repeats itself. So I think that we have to dig for that information, and it's not just, George doesn't lay stuff out for you all nice and neat and bow tied. you have to do some research, and you have to reread and everything. So yeah, I think that there's stuff that I certainly haven't found because I haven't done that much digging into it, but I'm sure there is a lot there. Just
Well, like you say, it's just clues to maybe a larger narrative that is underlaying what we see in the main narrative. So
yeah.
it's like
I mean, you can enjoy the story and get the full story without going and doing that. But I think that everyone here likes to puzzle it out and piece stuff together. And, one idea can spark a million others. It just gets so much fun to do and bounce ideas off of each other, like what we're doing now, just to see where it goes. There's a million rabbit holes.
exactly, and there's a million rabbit holes. There's a million trails to follow, and you can have hour-long conversations about what does this and what does that. And just truly, it just engages the front part of my brain, trying to puzzle these things out. And humans, I think, are just the way we're set up, where we're designed to look and make order of things and solve puzzles. And so if you've got the more complicated puzzle, in front of you, you can take it apart and put it back together again, and it really just helps engage you with the story. So yeah, the they may be part of. I mean, they could be part of the larger narrative when it comes to like their, the backstory and how it would relate to what's going on. If you look for those clues, like Amanda is so great at following all through the narrative about what this, what each little thing means. So, and it does enrich your understanding of the main narrative. So, Amanda, you've got anything to add on that one?
Yeah.
What do you think about Garth's kids?
So the implications, we have 12 different tales, like the 12 sons and daughters of Garth, so we have 12 different tales. Then we have, Land the Clever, and then Brandon of the Bloody Blade. And we really don't know the exact relation Land the Clever holds. He supposedly convinced Garth that he was his son, and he's possibly a son of not Ellen Eversweet.
Floris the Fox.
Well, a bastard of Floris the Fox, or the one with the gold hair, Rowan.
Rowan Golden Tree.
Rowan. Yeah. So there's a couple different options there. It's very interesting in that aspect. So we're not really sure the relation of Land the Clever, and we're not really sure the relation between Brand the Blade. All we know is they're related. That's all we've been given so far. Is it possible he's another child of Garth? I think it's highly likely. And
Garth had a lot of kids.
Yeah, he had a lot of kids, it's quite possible. But one of the things that I think that is very important to do is to think of the concept of the monomyth, and the possibility that all of these different, historical figures that are mentioned as children of Garth may actually be George just showing us more monomyth. And so what I like to do is I like to ask myself, are these the Garth, the Grey King, and the Nissa, and you do see that with like tales like Harlan the Hunter and Herndon of the Horn, who took to wife a woods witch, and they never aged as long as she embraced them. There's that, and then you see Maris the Maid. So it's in one tale she's a woods witch, but in another tale she's Maris the Maid, and the men that are fighting over her are Uthor of the Hightower, who we don't see any type of relation to Garth that we are aware of. But is it possible that that's another variation? Possibly. But hard to tell.
But all these guys from the Age of Heroes.
Absolutely. And Argoth Stoneskin is possibly another variation of the Grey King. So what I like to do is I like to say, are we just being given more variations of Nissa Nissa and the Grey King and Garth? And when you look at them, you can find them. So that's what I like to do. And so they do have implications in that aspect. And then when you specifically look at what Brandon of the Bloody Blade did, he like slew a bunch of children of the forest, and the red, it was called Blue Lake, and it was so bloody that he turned it red. But then you have another variation of Florian and Jonquil with the six maids in a pool, and when Jamie sees Maiden Pool, he sees it just choked full of dead bodies. And he talks about how disgusting and gross, and you see all these bodies in Maiden Pool. That's the first time that we see Maiden Pool introduced within the series, is there's bodies floating all over it. And then you take a look at what Hugo does to the Seven Swan Maidens, who are luring travelers to their deaths, and he slew them. So when you're looking at maybe, say, Brandon of the Bloody Blade, you're probably given another variation of that tale as well. And then you start to understand, is it possible that this mermaid wife, this, like half human, like weird, was witchy wife, was possibly children of the forest? That starts to kind of present itself. And it also kind of presents itself on, what had happened. And in some tales, it was a sacrifice to their gods, what Hugo did. In other tales, the forging of Lightbringer, Nissa Nissa was sacrificed in order for, Lightbringer to be forged. There's all different little connections in there. So anyway, there's that.
Yep. And the Tale of Land, where we're not really sure who his father is. I mean, he claims that he's the son of Garth, and he convinces, steals the gold from the sun to color his hair. And if he's trying to look like Garth, I always thought, well, that's a little weird. Wouldn't he want to have green hair if he wanted to pretend to be or present himself as the son of Garth? So that was kind of a little what's that all about? But he's in the tale that he's possibly a son of Rowan, Rowan Goldenhair, who got jilted out of she had this wealthy lover, she was supposed to be wed, and he jilted her out of the marriage pact. So would it be did he leave her a present? Was that his actual child, or was it Garth, the child of Garth? And then he's so a wealthy bridegroom, could very easily have been the Casterleys, who owned that whole mountain of gold in the Western lands. And there's a lot of gold symbolism, gold imagery around Rowan as well. So it could be like a revenge situation there, where the child of the woman, or the scorned woman, is out to receive her revenge from her through her son. So that would be another way of looking at Lightbringer, would be the son of the woman who is able to come back and seek revenge in her name.
Yes, and there's going back to what you were saying about the Dagda, there is this character or this mythological figure that he actually was the son of the Dagda, but he wasn't going to get any inheritance. So
we're going to talk about Angus Og.
Yeah, and he was something of a young golden type of a child. I think that he was associated a little bit with the sun. Anyway, he actually had to trick the Dagda in order to get his inheritance. And so you see almost an exact parallel between the two. And so if you're interested in just taking a look at that really neat parallel, it's the Dagda and Angus. It's just right there. It's perfect.
Yes, the Dagda is one of my favorite, Celtic mythology tales. There's so much green imagery in just around him and his family and the Celtic gods in general. They're a lot more green and associated with fertility and life and the cycling of the seasons than some of the other gods, mythological cycles that we take note of in the series, because we see a lot of the cycles from the Norse mythology with all the death imagery and the hanging and sacrifice. That's more of a where did I go? That's more of a the darker aspects of the story. But when you're looking at the life giving, the corn kings, the bringers of life and sustenance, you can look more towards the Celtic gods for these types of things. And the Dagda itself, Garth was described as, sometimes he was described as a giant man or a giant of a man, but he's this larger than life figure. And the Dagda himself is a lot of times described as a giant figure of, like the old man in the woods that runs, like the naked man in the woods. He usually runs around, kind of caveman style. He's not really, shall we say, refined. He's more in touch with the animalistic side of humanity, that is more in touch with nature than with civilization itself. So he's a lot closer to nature than some of the other figures that we can talk about. And with his harp, he is able to charm all the beasts of the field. So that gives him like control and dominion over animals. And he has his cauldron, the undry cauldron, or the cauldron of rebirth, either way you want to look at it, where he can feed the nations, feed the tribes, or he can return the dead to life, as they would, in some of the Ulster cycles. They use this cauldron to bring the dead back to life. When I think it's Bran, King of the British Isles, that's another cycle that's very close to this, because it has to do with a woman who's been taken away against her will, or she gets into a marriage pact that's not all that she looks it's supposed to be. So you have this wars and battles that are fought over Bran's sister. I think her name is Branwen.
Yes,
I think Branwen. So
yeah, and we've also got Dunk, who travels around with Egg, and I see him as a young Garth Greenhands, kind of, he's always saying thick as a castle wall, and maybe a little bit gullible and green,
foolish.
And he seems to make a lot of time with the ladies as he's traveling around, and we know that he has offspring because we get relatives of him in the main story. So that kind of gives me a clearer picture of maybe what Garth Greenhands was like when he was traveling around when he was younger.
Right. Well, I mean, if he came to Westeros by ship, he could very easily have been coming for trade, just like everyone else that was headed into Old Town. And so you've got all of those traveling salesman jokes that you could make about Garth the Green and the farmer's daughter. So, as a young man traveling around, but there's a deeper thing. There are stories of, one of the things that traders did back in, when most people didn't go anywhere. They stayed in the village that they lived in. They brought word and news with them, but a lot of times they brought a little fresh blood into the gene pool, so to speak, by hanging out, chilling, Netflix and chill. with some of the ladies in the village that were hadn't looking for a little something on the side, but the traveling salesman.
There's someone that's not my cousin or my brother.
Someone who's not my cousin or my brother, exactly. And that's similar to like what the wildlings are saying, because they won't the wildlings first men won't date anyone from their village because that's too close kin. So that's why the tradition of stealing the brides would come, stealing the wives would come in, so that they would get a fresh influx of blood and they wouldn't have weak children. So the reverse is kind of what we're looking at here, where instead of stealing a bride, you're borrowing a traveler. But the idea is the same, to so that you don't get stagnation, and you would have strong children like Dunk, a strong child. So Dunk was around making the 8. The hedge knights, they were all out. Can't trust them. Don't trust them with your daughter. So
but you can trust them with your egg.
You can trust them with your egg. I wouldn't trust them with your daughter. But yeah, so that I agree with that, Shar, that Dunk does have that imagery of the young man on the road traveling, and making those not foolish mistakes, but he has an innocence about him that he's not worldly. He doesn't have a lot of knowledge of the world, and that's a lot of what you can look at as the fool himself, where the fool
part of his charm too.
Yeah, that's part of his charm. He's a handsome fool, and he's so he goes around. He just kind of stumbles from one adventure to the next. He's not looking for these things to happen to. He's certainly not going out looking for to fall into Blackfire conspiracies or get in trouble with the law, or to end up fighting single combat because these two lords can't figure out how to share water. He just falls into these adventures. Not that he ever goes looking for them, but they just seem to happen around him for some reason. So it's almost like he's this agent of chaos wherever he goes. So does he bring the chaos, or does the chaos just find him wherever he is? So
yeah, he's a magnet for trouble.
Yes, very much so. Okay, let's see if we got any more questions in the chat. Oh no, I don't know why you can't book a Airbnb on the Isle of Faces. Okay, here's one from Lady Leaf. Cold Hands rides an elk. Any connection, or just general children of the forest involvement there? That's a good question, Leaf. We really didn't talk about Cold Hands, but we did talk about how the green men on the Isle of Faces, they have, they're horned, and they are also said to ride, or possibly that they ride elk or yeah. And so there could be a connection there between the green men there, and Cold Hands being an agent of Bloodraven, the last green seer. There's that connection there. So George could certainly be trying to tell us something with Cold Hands riding an elk, a dead man on eventually what turns into a dead elk north of the wall, in service to this mostly dead green seer under a tree wizard. So yeah. Let's see here. And Steven said, so Cold Hands could be, is he a Grey King parallel? So what do you think, Amanda? What do you think about Cold Hands and the Grey King?
Resurrected Night's Watch brother? Probably. Probably. There's not a lot that is like a 1-for-1 parallel with Cold Hands, but he's definitely giving those vibes off. So, is George R. R. Martin trying to inform us about something, with the use of Cold Hands? Probably. It's definitely a possibility. But as far as like, wow, that's like super great king. I haven't seen like anything that super stands out. There's no woman that's resurrecting him. There's, he isn't necessarily described as wearing gray, except his cloak is quite like mottled. So that's that there. The use of the word mottled is actually kind of a telltale giveaway. So that's there. There's things. Believe it or not, you get a little bit more with Blood Raven than Cold Hands. But yeah.
No, do you think that the stagmen on the Isle of Faces serve for life and afterlife? Is that something Cold Hands could be showing us with his stagman symbolism with the elk, and he's continuing to serve after he's already dead?
Mm-hmm.
And as far as we know, on the Isle, the God's Eye, they're not reproducing and mating. As far as we know, we don't know.
Yeah, there's no green women. There's no green women.
So
that we know of. There could be. I mean, there could be. There could be green women. They could be like procreating, but we really don't have. We pretty much have no information on the green men, and so it's just a huge pot of speculation, like wild speculation in some cases. Some cases, we're just kind of putting our feelers out and putting predictions out there and kind of trying to put 2 and 2 together. So is it possible that the green men who carved the original faces are the same green men that are there right now in the current present storyline? I think it's possible. I mean, really anything's possible when you're talking about, this kind of really arcane, weird magic. And this is like an epicenter of it. Mm-hmm. And so you're at a place where George does like to use like low magic. He doesn't like to put too much magic out there. Yeah. But at the Isle of Faces, I think that, a lot more could possibly be possible. So
I'm getting an image of the Holy Grail being guarded, like in which Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom or whichever one it is, and they've been there, the whole time, and it's not necessarily where they're procreating, and there's more of them, and I'm just getting that in my mind of the same ones for forever are charged with whatever they're charged with doing on the God's Eye.
Right. Well, you see you hear a lot of stories about these protectors, these guardians who have to stay at their post until they are finally relieved by the next guardian who has to prove themselves worthy. That's another part of one of the monomyths is you have to prove yourself worthy to either attain the prize or to be let into the secret castle or to see the Grail, like you were saying. So they have to. That's all part of the hero's journey. But if you look at it as part of a quest as well. So there's tasks, and there's always tasks and testing and learning that has to go before you're ever able to get to that inner sanctum, so to speak, on the dungeon. So there could be just a few of the green men there that are just patiently waiting for the next the next one to come along who will be able to stand their post for them, so that they can be relieved of their duty, like standing watch, standing guard, or protecting. So we don't know, but it's just a lot. It's fun to think about. It's fun to let your mind just think about these things and what ifs. So Wiz the Smith, who wrote a wonderful essay about the Hollow Hills that we learn a lot about green seers from, and I believe he spoke very lengthily about High Garden itself. Asked a question. Garth seems to be a corn king. Yes, very much so. Have you any ideas how that may connect with the other potential or probable corn kings in the story? And he names Jon Snow. Yes. And maybe even Bran, who has a lot of, these two particularly have a lot of corn imagery surrounding them, with the corn and the ravens. So yes, I see them both as corn kings. Bran himself is, he sacrificed his body. And I think the corn king that he reminds me the most of from mythology is this fellow called Crom Cruy from Irish mythology, or he could be called Crom Dubh. And he lives in a cave. He has crooked and broken legs, and he lives under the Hollow Hill, like you say, in a cave under a hill, and he has these sacrifices that would be brought to him, and he's fed sacrifices. So the broken and bent and crooked legs was what really reminded me a lot of Bran, because his legs are broken and crooked, and he's unable to use them and move himself around the cave. But that he has the weirwood paste, which may or may not be his friends. His sacrifice, the sacrifice is brought to him. So that's one. And then there's you've got Jon Snow, who died for all of our sins. Yeah, John definitely has that type of corn king imagery, where the raven is always, and we know that raven is either Bran or Blood Raven speaking through the raven. He's always talking about corn, king, when John's around. So go ahead, Amanda. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
And his name is literally Bran. I mean, his name is Bran. It's which is like a
seed.
Bran. It's his name's literally Bran, but it's also tied to another resurrected corn king type of thing, which you just talked about, which was the Legend of Bran. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like all over the place. And so is it going to be exactly like it it was in the show, or are we going to possibly see a type of death and resurrection? He definitely changed in the show, so we have that. So it's possible Bran goes through some sort of resurrection. Maybe it's just a metaphorical or symbolic type of a change. It's possible it's like that, but like his name is literally Bran. He's named named after mythical legendary figure that resurrects. That's like his thing. That's the thing he does. So it's definitely there. And then of course Jon is dead now. Like, let's face it, in the books.
Uh-oh,
you're muted.
You muted again.
That's okay. Jon's dead.
No, but there's people in the forums, and they're always like, he could still be alive. Come on, guys. Like, he could still be like, no, Jon's dead, dude.
Jon's dead.
Deal with it, but so either we're never going to see Jon again, like he's dead, or he's going to resurrect. And that's, that's planned. The second choice is the most likely of the two. And we've seen it over in the TV series, and it's kind of been set up for it. So why not? Why wouldn't Jon do the whole death and resurrection, and kind of take on a little bit more of that resurrected God type of a thing. He definitely has a lot less fertility than other characters.
Yeah.
Basically, he
Right,
does.
guys.
He may be like, when I like to talk about the Grey King and Garth, the Grey King was likely once a lot like his brother, like a fertility Garth type figure, green hair. I've talked about that a lot. And so what he may actually, and I've also talked about his death and resurrection. And so the Grey King going through this transformation, it doesn't necessarily take away his like almost like storm, like fertility previous aspect. It's there. But he may actually be less of a Garth Corn King type and more of a Grey King Corn King type archetype. So
right.
So
But you can kind of see like that too, duality in nature of these fertility gods, these fertility kings. They have the warlike nature where that's where they're out, and they have their warlike demeanor where they're taking life. Would say when Garth, when the Reach went to war, or what have you, when Garth went to war, he would wear the crown of, I think it was iron and bronze. It's a crown of bronze. And anyway, when he was in his, when things are all hunky dory, he wears crown of flowers. So that just shows like duality and dual nature of these type of gods or mythological figures, that they, they can be both at the same time. They can take life and they can give life. So like there's this figure, one of my favorite gods in the Celtic pantheon. Because let's just explain. Celtic doesn't mean like just from Ireland or just from Great Britain or the British Isles. It can be the coastal Northern Europe. It can be as far away as, the Rhine, the Danube River. Rhine, wrong country. As far as the Danube, it's just a huge a classification of these types of people that were looked at from an outside perspective as being like one people. And we're looking from a Roman perspective, these others. But they're more than, they're just more of a confederation of tribes as opposed to like one unified, organization. So, you have you're on the continent, there's this figure is called Isis. Isis is one of my favorites because he's a sacrificial god as well. He's got an association with trees. He's this bearded woodsman who carries an axe. So, and he accepts sacrifices. And he's in charge of growth and fertility and prosperity. So he's kind of warlike, and you would sacrifice to Isis before going to war. These people would by flaying and hanging prisoners and enemies in trees as part of their sacrifice to Isis. So that's that's a lot of heavy weirwood first man symbolism there, especially with bringing the axes to the trees, and he's depicted as chopping off branches of a willow tree, which is associated with death. It's another one of those trees that are associated with death and water and rebirth that way. You also have him. It's part of a trinity with this guy called Tyrannus, who's like a thunder god, the storm god. So they're locked in this. They're brothers, two sides of the same coin. With Tyrannus bringing the storm, the rain, and bringing fertility to the land, and then the land itself. And they all would accept sacrifices differently. Tyrannus, and the third part of this trinity is this guy called Tutates, which is just like the people. It means the Lord, the people, the protector, the people itself. So out of this trinity, you get the sacrifices to Tyrannus, which we burned. You get sacrifices given to Isis, which are flayed and hanged and and hung in trees. And then Tutates, he accepts his sacrifices through drowning. And you see all these images of these three gods on the cauldron, the gum-distraught cauldron, which is one of the fewest relics that we actually have from these guys who, to depict their mythology and some of their stories to us. Everything else we have comes secondhand because these guys didn't write things down. Much like the first men, they had an oral tradition, and all their history was recorded and transmitted word of mouth, person to person, through their learned men and women, and they would tell these stories. And through the ages, the stories would change and develop, and we would but they all have a common thread that runs through them, because they're all still the same people, and they view the world the same way.
So they had a drowning sacrifice, a burning sacrifice, and a flaying and hanging in the tree sacrifice. So the old gods, the drowned god, and the
like
Valorism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, you can see like different parts of which Valorism is kind of like I think of it as I don't want to say perverted, but like a different form of like a sun worshiping, because fire and sun are so very similar. So it's still sort of like worshiping like the sun or the solar deities.
See, I have a very tinfoil idea.
Hold on, guys. I gotta go. It's about to get really, really loud in here.
Okay. And well, thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Really, we've been coming.
Yeah, no problem. So I will see you guys later.
Okay. Thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Okay. Okay.
Bye. Wow. So 2 hours have kind of sped by. Okay. So the building on the brand connection. Garth is said to be the first of the first men, but the World of Ice and Fire says the first men came from the Fisher Queens of the Silver Sea, making Garth a Fisher King. I agree. Fisher Kings has a lot of the same imagery as Garth Kings. The Fisher King, if you're not familiar with that, is it's part of the legendarium around the Grail mythology. The Fisher King sits in his throne. He's wounded. His land is suffering. He's received, as Emma is very well documented, the dolorous stroke. And dolorous meaning it could be a leg wound. It could be very high up on the thigh, which is kind of veiled language for saying a castration type injury. Guys don't like to talk about that, so they will say it's high on the thigh. So yes, so that would be that's what the Fisher King is about. So that would be the part of the blighted land. And the Fisher Kings said to I think he sits in a boat all day fishing and lets his son run things because he can no longer move around and do things. And he's only cured, I believe, by the quest of the person from the quest who's able to either ask or answer the proper questions. So there's a lot of the what we were talking about with the Order of the Green Men, where they're the guardians and the protectors, and they're sitting and waiting patiently for someone to, who could possibly come along and be their, replacement. But to do so, you have to pass the test. And some of the Arthurian legends, it's Galahad, I believe, who's finally able to successfully pass the testing and heal the Fisher King. So once the Fisher King has been healed, then the land returns to fertility. So that's one way of looking at the cycling of the seasons and how the land and the king or sovereignty are one thing. So let's see. Da-da. Okay, Celtic god. And let's see if we got any more. Oh yeah, Wiz says that the Celtic god Danu was said to come from the Danube, which is a very good way of looking at it, because the Danube is this huge river system, much like we'd see with the the area around the Rhoynar and the Danube itself, where the river gives so much life to the area that, and it's such a huge thing in flood that it gives life to the area, and it can be perceived very much as the mother. So much like Mother Rhoyne is the mother to the Rhoynar and her people, the Danube is the mother of the people there. And these people were migratory. So, moving from east to west, you would the Danube is one end of the extension of these type of people, where they settled in river valleys. Good place to live, and the culture spread westward throughout the rest of Europe, and bringing their cultures, gods, traditions, and everything with them. Good catch, Wiz. Okay, yep, I stumbled across her research. Yep, about the triple goddesses. So, all right. So we've been going now for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think we've covered a lot of stuff. We could probably talk for another hour or two just on this, but I think we'll go ahead and call it. We'll call it. And I'd love to have you on again, and we can talk some more about the Garth and mythology and Song of Ice and Fire, the Grey King, all these myths, the mono-myths. I'd love to have you back on, and we can talk about all of Garth's crazy ass kids. Oh, I said that.
Yes, I would love to talk about crazy kids.
Yeah, crazy kids. That's we've all got crazy kids, and it's all very relatable. So,
it's so good to see everyone in the chat. I haven't seen Wiz in a long time. Bronny
in the chat. Emma's in the chat. Good to see some of you guys. Haven't seen you in a while. Of course, Sanrixian, our daughter is there.
Yeah,
she's here. She's a channel regular. She's a champ. Always love to see her when she pops in. So, okay. Well, we can continue this another time, or we can just come up with another galaxy brain and talk about something different. Thank you, Sanrixian. I have been demonetized. Wait a second. I'm not monetized. I can say what I want.
Yeah. I'll get back on that because my channel's been growing. Okay. If I ever get to the monetization part, I need to learn to quit cussing.
I will never be monetized. I can't help it. I've just got I've lived with a sailor too long. I've absorbed some of the salty language. So, well, I guess we'll sign off now. It was great to have you guys come by. I've had a great time, talking about these things with people that I love, with an audience full of people that I love. Thank you so much for stopping by. Shar, what have you got coming up on your channel soon?
I don't know. I think I'm going to be covering some of the American Idol contestants. And I think that the giraffe video that I did, the wildlife, that guy is so hilarious. So you'll probably be seeing some more wildlife documentaries on my channel that are for fun. And then, of course, I'm always supporting independent artists and stuff. So that's pretty much what I've got going on.
Right on, right on. Yeah. Subscribe to Shara's channel. Share the music. Her channel is on fire right now. You just got that one video that's had what, 2,000-3,000 views so far?
It's last time I looked at it, it was like over 2,000 views in I think we're on day 4. And I've gained about 100 subscribers just off that one video.
Yeah.
It's been ridiculous. The people of Nepal are just amazingly nice. And namaste if any of y'all see this.
Namaste. Yes. So that's great. And as far as what do we got coming up on my channel, who knows? We could do a follow-up on the Garth stream where we could talk about the children of Garth, which would be great. There's some things I'd like to discuss with, having to do with House Tyrell. This would be a different topic, but, House Tyrell and some of the connections that it may have with the Stewards of Gondor. So that would be a little Tolkienian influence there. I might have my good buddy John come on and we'll talk about that. Some other things that I'd like to discuss is
Tolkien expert.
There's some other things, topics for the channel that, I'd like to bring up, or, I'd like to dip into the MCU because, if you're looking at what mythology looks like in the modern era, you wouldn't look any further than our superheroes on, that we've created for ourselves, like, Thor, Captain America. These guys are our modern version and our modern telling of, a mythos. So that's a topic I'd like to, we can sink our teeth into. So if you are interested in any of those topics, you might want to tune back in this Sunday on the Here Be Dragons channel, which I'm also a part of. We are going to be discussing everybody's favorite. I mean, we did a Twitter poll. It wasn't even close. Steven's man crush, Amos Burton. Wes Chatham plays this guy in the series, and he's real easy on the eye. But Amos as a character he is such a fascinating he's a fascinating character. He's got such depth, layers. I don't think there's a more complex character written than Amos Burton. So if you guys tune in on Sunday for our regular live stream on Here Be Dragons, we'll be talking about that. And next week, I believe on Thursday of next week, I'll be on John's channel, John Webster Film, and we will be discussing the first season of Rome. If anybody has watched the series on HBO, you might want to take another look at it. It's great without HBO getting into these types of period dramas, Rome being one of the first. There would have been no Game of Thrones. So if you guys get a chance to brush up on that, the first season. Anyway, we'll be discussing that on next Thursday. So not everybody leave. I'm sorry. I mean, John, I know he's not your favorite, but we'll get around to Mr. Hat Man. We'll get around to talking about your boy crush, Miller, very soon. So, all right, guys, that's it. Thank you for coming and visiting me over in my little corner of the interweb. You're always family when you're here, and I just want everybody to take care of themselves. I know there's a lot of scary stuff going on out there in the world, but if you just want to break from reality and talk about some fun things to take your mind off of it, we're here. We're here to help and have a good time while we're doing it. Hang out with your friends. So, peace, guys. Take care of yourself. Be safe. And we'll see you on the flip side. So, thank you for coming. Thank you. Bye.
we'll see you guys next if I get invited